Okay, we are live with our tech talks. We don't have any faculty joining us on Zoom yet, but we might see a couple people pop in, and hopefully some people will be watching on YouTube. This one's a fairly simple, straightforward topic, but I think it's one that's worth talking about for a couple reasons. One, because we know from both anecdotal evidence and from student surveys that this is something that students often wish that we could do for them. And then also Canvas just made some changes to the interface of this tool. So I think those are both good reasons to talk about it. So the topic is opening your course early, earlier than the start of term. And Jerry's here to make sure I don't say anything that's dramatically incorrect or inaccurate about this process. So I guess we'll just get right into it. I'll share my screen and I'll show you what this looks like. And then we can talk about what the different settings do, what they don't do, and then maybe some best practices of how you can make this actually worthwhile for your students. So let me share my screen. Okay, so I'm in Canvas here. I'm just in a practice course. And normally, just the default settings, anytime a new course is created, it is attached to a particular term. And correct me if I'm wrong about any of this part, Jerry.
Okay.
When a course is on the schedule, Canvas automatically creates a section for that scheduled course, and it's put onto the appropriate term. So in this case, one that's coming up soon would be spring 2021. So far, so good?
That's correct.
Okay. And then what is by default, the term has a start date and an end date in Canvas. And it's not the same as the start of instruction. Is it how many days before the start of instruction does a term open?
Let me double check. Actually, so let me look at the current term setting for spring. But as I recall, I mean, it's not like I'm the one that does. Oh, wait a minute. I'm the one that does this. I should know this by now. Oh, that's interesting. I didn't set the term. Oh, that's weird. So anyway, I'm gonna have to go in and set the term dates for spring so that I don't screw this up. I'm glad you brought.
I'm glad you're here, Jerry.
I thought I did all this. So anyway, what we do is we start the term date to begin the term. We have a runs date, which runs from the first day of the term all the way through to 2 weeks after the term ends.
Okay.
That's what we set in Canvas. And then we send student access to begin the day of and all the way through to 1 week after the term ends is when student access closes. Now, teachers don't have any restrictions. They can go in whenever they want.
Right. As soon as the course is on the schedule, basically, it shows up in their course list, right?
That's correct.
Okay. But for students, the default setting is even if a course has already been published by the instructor, it's not visible to students until the start of the term.
It's read-only access until the start of the term.
Okay, read-only access. Okay, perfect. But we know that it's often the case that students, especially the students that are trying to be on the ball, trying to be proactive, they would like to be able to get into their courses basically as early as possible, especially if it's something like they want to look at the syllabus so that they can double check the schedule and the textbooks, publisher website requirements, that sort of thing. So we know that a lot of students wish that they could get into those courses earlier. And you might have a pre-course self-assessment or a syllabus quiz or something like that set up, maybe an introduction discussion post where by default, students can't even start on that until the first day of class, but students might want to be able to get to that early, and you might want them to get to that early at least as an option. Certainly wouldn't set any due dates before the start of the term, but it might be nice to let students get a head start on those if it's possible and if it's practical for you. So to do this, it's actually fairly simple in Canvas. You as the instructor of a course have access to this tool. So if I'm in a course and I go to settings, what I'm looking for is this setting right here where it says participation. So the default is term, which means this course is bound to the start and end dates of the term that Jerry, as the Canvas admin, has set up. But we can actually change that. We can change that from term to course. And if we do that, then as the instructor, you can manually set a different start date for this course. So what's the start date for spring, Jerry? Do you know off the top of your head?
Start date is April 5th.
April 5th. So maybe I wanted to open this up a week early. Let's say I have at least my first module and my intro module all finished, all ready to go. I've got the syllabus in there. And maybe I want to open this up to students early. So I could set that to March 29th instead. And then if I hit, now, Jerry, that's all I have to do, right? If I want to open this course up early to students?
That's correct, because if you leave the end date blank, it will default to the end date in the term calendar.
Okay, so if I leave end date blank, then it will still close at the normal predetermined term end.
That's correct.
Okay, perfect. So that's really all I need to do just for a basic opening early is change the start date, update course details. And then obviously I also need to go back and make sure the course is published, because if it's not published, then it will never be visible to students, no matter what the term or the course dates say. So that's as simple as that part is. Let's say I am still working on the rest of the course, but I would like them to have access to that intro module. So that's pretty simple. You would just go back to modules, make sure that your start here module is published, and just keep everything else unpublished until you're ready for that to be visible to students. So, maybe I'm not ready to show them week 1 yet, but I want them to see my pre-course assessment and my start here page and my syllabus and a couple other things that I want them to have in here. And maybe I have a syllabus quiz or an introduction discussion post that I'd like them to have access to early. I can have all that in my module 0, have that published, and then students can get right at it. There were a couple other settings in the term start date or the participation setting. And Jerry, this is the part that always trips me up, because once you have changed it from term to course, you can set the start date, you can set an end date if you want, although we probably don't usually want to mess with that for a variety of reasons. But then there's also these 2 other buttons here: restrict students from viewing course before the start date, and restrict students from viewing course after the course end date. And this is the part that I always get tripped up on. So Jerry, I wonder if you could briefly explain what those do.
So basically what those do is they prevent a student from even having read-only access or even seeing the course on their course list. If you click restrict students from viewing course before the course start date, they don't have read-only access to the course prior to the start of the course.
Okay.
If you click it on the restrict students from viewing the course after the course end date, no read-only access. They can't even see the course. They cannot click on it to open the course up to look at the content.
Okay. So if I weren't changing the participation dates on here, then really I would, as the instructor, I would control that visibility just by publishing or unpublishing, right?
Yeah, so one thing I will point out, and one of the things that's changed here because of this new setup, you do have to put an end date in that ends field now, because what you're taking this out of is you're taking this out of the term, the global term management area.
Okay.
You're managing it locally. I'm sorry. It used to be you could leave that blank, but that was because everything was tied together. Because it's based on just the course, you do have to put an end date in there, or you run the risk of keeping that course open indefinitely, literally in perpetuity.
Okay, so you do, if you do change the participation to course, then you do want to manually add.
That is correct. And the end date for the spring term is June 18th. So, you know,
So by default, it's what, 1 week after the end of class? So,
well, we close the term 2 weeks after the end of class, so it would be
Okay.
July 2nd that it
Okay.
would close. So you could, yeah.
Perfect. All right. Yeah. So that's good to know. Or I suppose an instructor could just change this back to term after even after that first week of early access, then they could
That's
switch
correct,
back to
yeah.
term. And then it would go back to the normal default state and they wouldn't have to worry about it, which might be, as long as you remember to do that once the course is officially started, then that probably kind of takes the worry out of your own mind of accidentally forgetting to do that or setting the date wrong. Yeah, so I'm trying to think of some good use cases where this might be a helpful tool for faculty. So like you said, that can change the read-only access. So by default, if a course is still just set to the term and I had it published, if I published the course now and it was set to term, as long as the student is enrolled in the class, they have read-only access to this course. Is that correct?
That's correct.
So they could go in here and they could look at whatever I have that's published. So if I have that Start Here module published, they can look at it already, even if I don't change the dates on it.
Yeah.
Okay. But what they couldn't do is they couldn't interact with anything. They couldn't take a quiz. They couldn't do a discussion post or anything like that.
Correct.
Okay. So I'm trying to think of reasons why we would want to either manually publish, unpublish, or manually change the date. So I suppose one use case would be if you're one of those magical instructors who always has everything ready to go, or at least the first module or the Start Here, the syllabus ready to go early, and you have everything done. Normally you might just rely on that publish unpublished button to manually start the class for students. But if you have everything done 3 weeks in advance and you're planning on leaving town for spring break or to take a break between terms, or you just have other things going on, you could have that first Start Here module ready to go. You could publish the course, and then you could manually change that participation date to the week before class starts or 2 weeks before class starts, and then check off that restriction button so that it wouldn't be visible to students until that date.
That's correct.
Okay. So that would be one helpful purpose for this setting, I think.
Yeah. Plus, if you have a course where some of the certification type courses like CNA course, they'll check that restrict students from viewing course after course end date because they have to take a CNA exam separate from the, separate CNA exam. They may turn that off.
Right.
If you've got, I've had instructors, I've known nursing instructors that were very adamant after the end, you don't get access to the course after the course closes. So you better retain it all now. I'm not quite sure why, but that was one of the people I ran into before.
Yeah. Well, I think nursing always has their own very specific and very strict accreditation requirements. And I'm sure that kind of data security is part of that. I don't really know the details of it.
Yeah, I didn't understand it, but it was his course, his content. He controlled the access to it.
Do we generally have any courses that might run outside of the normal term schedule where it would be helpful for faculty to manually change these?
I've spoken to some folks, and I don't know what department it was in, but they did have courses that were shortened, that were 7-week courses. And this is how they managed those courses. They would open it up on day 1, week 1, and then close it on week 7, day 7.
Yeah.
So that because it was a shortened course, but I don't remember off the top of my head what department that was in.
Jerry, we often get a question from a faculty member who one of their students gets an incomplete for the quarter, and they want to open their course back up. Is this what you'd recommend them doing, or would you recommend putting that student in a unique shell?
It really depends on how much work it depends on two things. One, it depends on if the instructor cares if the other students have full read and write access to the course. Because if you leave it open for a month and a half after the term closes, every student in that course can still go in and have read and write access. Now, if all your assignment due dates are passed, things like that, that's fine. Yeah. The other thing here too is if the term has closed to it, if the term is closed, the term date has passed, if the term closing date at the account level has passed, instructors can't go in and change this. I have to go in and change it. So sometimes they find it easier just to create a new term, a new shell, put the student in it, copy the content over, and then just put the student into a separate shell by themselves.
Good to know, because it doesn't look like this is a real granular feature where I'm able to add, specific students with specific access. It's kind of all or nothing, right?
No, it's still that's still the issue is what do you do with incompletes? And again, yeah, it just opens it up for everybody. And most instructors, that's not a big deal for them anyway, but it's just a warning. And I give that warning to all instructors. It's like, if you don't do it and you don't want everybody to have access to your course,
right,
then this is the alternate is a separate shell with a student enrolled in it individually.
Yeah. So I guess the answer to incompletes is it depends.
Yeah.
And I guess if a faculty member is in that situation and they're not sure what the better solution for their situation is, come talk to us and we can help them work through what the pros and cons are of each solution and figure something out for them.
Yeah.
Jerry or Ben, is there anything else about course access dates or opening things early that you can think of that is worth talking about right now?
Let me see if I can put a bow on it.
Okay.
We're one of the things that our student success coaches will always talk about, because they get to hear the student perspective a lot, and a lot of it's rants and raves, struggles of being an online student. Is just not having early access to courses, or courses not being published on the first day of the quarter. And, if anything, we'd recommend at least get your syllabus, open for the students earlier. Yeah. So, if you're going to lock down everything, that's good. No problem. But the students often want to see their syllabus, get in there and just get an idea of what to expect. Because we know who those students are. They're not logging in day 2 or 3. They're type A's. They're going to be working in advance, and just as a way to reduce their anxiety, let's let them see the syllabus, and go ahead and get in there. But often, there's a reality of the course isn't ready yet too, and we're definitely not asking you to work on your break, on your spring break when you have 4 or 5 days off is all. But if it's possible to go ahead and open up your courses, I think anecdotally, as Caleb mentioned, this is a thing our students want, and they're asking for a lot, and They would love to see this for sure.
And even if you don't even have the syllabus ready yet, even just having a welcome message saying, this is the course, I will have the syllabus and the first Start Here module ready by such and such date. Your textbook is, and give them the date and the ISBN number or whatever. Even if you just give them that alone is going to reduce that anxiety. Because like you said, those type A students, anytime there's any uncertainty or any ambiguity, that is the most stressful, terrifying thing to those students. They just want to know that you're there. They want to know that the class exists. Because that's something that we constantly see every term is some students coming to the success coach or to one of us in a panic saying, my class isn't there. And they think that they've been unenrolled from class, and they think there's something wrong with their financial aid, and they think they didn't get registered, when really all it is it hasn't been published yet. So just giving them that little bit of reassurance is a huge thing for some students.
Plus, I think it's also helpful to let students explore your course so they can understand the structure of your course shell, where your menu items are, because every instructor has a different menu layout. So let them get comfortable with the menu layout and the location of content too, so that they're not spending the first day of class trying to just figure out how to navigate the course.
Yeah, agreed.
Good point, Jerry. Next week, I don't think we're rolling with the TED Talk, are we?
I don't think so, because we originally had one that was scheduled, but we didn't have a topic yet. We said to be announced later. But then in our office, we had the opportunity to do a pretty intense training workshop next week. So I think we're going to be busy with that. So no TED Talks, Tech Talks next week, but we will be back for the start of spring quarter.
Yeah, so look for something in early April from e-learning for our next Tech Talk series. And as always, if you have any topics, send them to Mr. Hutchins or myself.
Absolutely.
And it's always great to have Jerry. Thanks for joining us this week, Jerry.
It's always fun to be here.
Thanks, Jerry. Thanks, Ben. And I'll see everybody later. So I'm going to hit stop on our broadcast.